Welcome back to my reviews of my favorite Transformers cartoon ever, Beast Wars. In today's review, we're taking a look at the episode Fallen Comrades. In this episode, both the Maximals and Predacons race to collect the first stasis pod to fall to Earth in this series. If the Maximals get there first, they'll awaken their sleeping comrade. If the Predacons do, then they'll reprogram the protoform into one of their own. We begin with said stasis pod entering Earth's atmosphere, which is tracked by both the Maximals and Predacons. And from their maps, it seems like the pod has landed in Russia, China, India. As you may have guessed from my last Rescue Bots review, I'm not great at geography. Although, to be fair, the maps in the show aren't exactly accurate to the real world either. Dinobot uncharacteristically advises caution, but his worries are warranted as he and Optimus are ambushed outside their base, the latter of which is heavily damaged.
Fear not, Optimus. I shall ensure that your funeral is a glorious one.
Afraid I'll have to miss it, Dinobot. I'm not scrapped yet.
Are you certain it would be a triumphant passage?
Megatron sends his flyers to retrieve the stasis pod, while he and the others mount an assault on the Axelon. Rhinox, Rattrap, and Cheetor race to reach the pod in time. And I can't imagine what this snow effect is going to look like with YouTube's compression, which is notorious for making lots of tiny particles like this look all muddy and terrible. Plus the fact that this show was originally made in, 480p, if that? It really makes me wish we had an HD remaster of Beast Wars. So the Predacons take out the ice bridge, forcing the Maximals to take the long way around. They really could use some Elsa snow powers right about now.
The cold never bothered me anyway.
Back at base, Dinobot and Optimus brainstorm a way to contact the pod before the Predacons can get their claws on it. But while Dinobot is working, Megatron arrives and tries to convince Dinobot to return to the Predacons. But of course, Dinobot would never do something like that, right? But it turns out this was just a distraction for Scorponok and Tarantulas to sneak up behind him and shoot him in the back. By the way, it seems that Scorponok's torso is kind of messed up in this shot. The most obvious mistake being that it looks like his scorpion legs are clipping through his chest. Kind of like when the underwire comes out of your bra.
Finish him!
Dinobot activates the autoguns in a hilarious bit where Scorponok tries not to move until all his shaking ends up setting off the motion sensors anyways. They beam instructions to the pod by bouncing it off the moon. But which moon is this? Both teams arrived at the pod, where we can see some Maximal Cybertronics on the side, which I believe says Pod 13. Although what the number 13 symbolizes, I don't know. Tigertron isn't the 13th Transformer to appear in the cartoon. He'd be the 11th, or 12th if you count Starscream in Cheetor's dream. Maybe he's the 13th character model Mainframe created for the show, if you again include Starscream and Megatron's pre-Earth form? Or maybe it's just a reference to when the script for this episode was finalized, March 13th, 1996. So the Predacons open the pod, only to discover that it is empty. And it is revealed that one of the kitties is actually the new Maximal Tigatron, voiced by Blue Man Kuma, who's a great actor both on camera and in cartoons. He's had roles in other Mainframe shows, such as Reboot and Shadow Raiders. And I was just watching the My Little Pony episode, Bridal Gossip, where he plays Fluttershy's deep voice, Flutter Guy.
I don't want to talk about it. Oh, I don't know. Seems awfully dangerous.
Which, funnily enough, also features the debut of a character with black and white stripes. And we also don't know until the end if they'll turn out to be a good guy or a bad guy. Speaking of the end, this episode concludes with Tigertron defeating the Predacons and being welcomed into the Maximals fold. Although he says he prefers the wild, and thus why Tigertron only appears in about every other episode after this one. It's also interesting to note that Tigertron's cat mode is actually female, since he presumably scanned his little friend Snowstalker, who seems to be the only other white tiger around, and she is a female cat. Unless the stasis pod adapted Tigertron's beast mode's physiology to match his robot mode gender, then his beast mode is actually female. Which is evident because when we see the two side by side, they look identical. Now, you could dismiss this as Mainframe simply reusing the same model, rather than making one special for Tigertron and one for Snowstalker, but I'd rather like to believe that Tigertron is sort of a bi-gender transformer, which kind of fits since he later hooks up with Airraiser, but we'll get to her in due time. Speaking of Snowstalker, I wish we'd get a female version of Tigertron as Snowstalker. While it wouldn't really make sense since she is an actual white tiger and not a transformer, I still think it would be pretty cute. This was a great episode of Beast Wars. It introduced us to the whole gimmick of the stasis pods, and how the Maximals and Predacons must reach them first in order to add another member to their side. It's actually kind of a genius idea. Whenever the writers want to add a new cast member, they just call down a stasis pod. It's an idea that would kind of be reused again in Transformers Armada, with the Autobots and Decepticons competing to find and collect as many minicons as they can in order to have an advantage on the other faction. Even more so when the special minicon teams that make up the Starsaber, Skyboom Shield, and Requiem Blaster come into play later in the show. Well, let me know what you thought of this episode of Beast Wars down in the comments. Remember to like, share, and do all that other fun stuff. And I'll see you back here next week for the next episode of Beast Wars Double Jeopardy. Another good episode. So be sure to come back next time for that.